All right, this being the appointed time and place and seeing a quorum present, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Could all please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Lynn, would you please take the roll? Here.
Tina Johnson, here. David Schrader,
Here.
David Smith,
Here.
Craig Workman,
Here.
Fred Young,
Here.
Mike Higgins,
Here.
Lori Holland, here. Diana Johnson, here.
Thank you. Previewing the agenda, do we need to make any changes to the order of items? No. All right, thank you. Then this brings us to the first of two times on our agenda for public input. I would just like to stress the following, and if you address the board, please give your name and address for the record. Also, at the same time, there is a log up there. If you could write that down there for us as well. In addition, there's a topic line on that. Just put a couple, 3 words what your topic is, just helps us again capture it for record keeping purposes. I'd ask you to keep your remarks brief. That means just a couple minutes each. And depending on where the comments go and how repetitive they are, we may put a limit on how many overall speaking. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board at this time? Please.
Hello, I have a couple of handouts, folks, and pass them down, so I don't have quite enough for everybody, but there's 10 there. So good evening. My name is Jim Drinwater. I am a resident of Watertown. Tonight I wanted to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart: mental health. Children today aren't growing up in the same world that many of us did. Many of our students are struggling to navigate the spectrums of gender and sexuality while facing increased focus and criticism from the community around them. According to a 2018 study by Hedgard, Curtin, and Moore, suicide was the second leading cause of death among young people aged 10 to 24 in America. While this fact is startling and would cause anyone to be concerned with the health of America's youth, the statistics show that some groups are more at risk of this than others. Studies from 2019 and 2020 found that LGBTQ youth were more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide as their peers, with the Trevor Project estimating that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ youth aged 13 to 24 seriously considered suicide per year, resulting in an estimated attempt at suicide every 45 seconds. If you were to continue down this rabbit hole, you would find that LGBTQ youth who also belong to a racial minority group are at an even larger risk and are also disproportionately represented in reports of foster care, housing instability, and food insecurity. So with all of that in front of us, you're probably wondering why I bring this up at a school board meeting. The Trevor Project identified many factors that contribute to all of these statistics. These factors were minority stress, rejection and a lack of social support or affirming spaces, physical harm and bullying, and discrimination. All of these are things that these children can experience within our schools. Only 55% of LGBTQ youth reported their schools as being LGBTQ affirming. That number dropped to 37% when asked about their home life. 36% reported that they were physically harmed or threatened in the last year, and 52% who were enrolled in middle or high school reported being bullied in person or electronically. So how can you help? Studies show that having at least one accepting adult can reduce the risk of suicide for an LGBTQ youth by 40%. Students with trusted adults in their schools routinely have higher levels of self-esteem, and students with access to gender and sexualities alliances in their schools report lower rates of suicide and depression. Students who report their pronouns being respected by adults and peers see their rates of suicide and depression cut in half. It's really simple. Letting kids be who they are and not fear about being accepted is good for them, and we can help. With the school year fast approaching, it is imperative that our teachers be allowed and encouraged to respect the pronouns of their students, and that we do all that we can to help students feel welcomed and accepted. This should include the creation of a gender and sexuality alliance at the middle school here in Watertown. Creation of this group would help act as a home base for LGBTQ students and would firmly establish for our students a place where they have a caring and accepting adult in their life, as well as a peer group in which they can feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Who next, please, Vivek?
And you want us to sign in here?
If you would, please, sir.
My name is David Byrne. I live at 23 Parkview Lane. I'm 22 as I wrote down here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. One group, I wanted to ask how many supporters are here for the LGBT community.
Please, sir, just direct your comments to the board, please.
All right. I'd like to thank the board for their past support for LGBTQ issues and their present support and hopefully their future support. I'm a clinical psychologist and I practiced in Watertown for close to 20 years. I now practice in Oconomowoc. During that time, I've worked with a wide variety of members of the LGBTQ community, but often in secret. And the services I provide are private and confidential, so some people make use of that. The problem with seeing me is that it costs money. I can only see so many people pro bono, and there's a structure to it. People need insurance, and if they live in a family where the message is negative, I don't see those students. If their church is sending a negative message, I typically don't see those students. They also are subjected to political groups and politicians saying hateful things. This takes a toll on our youth, and often one of the things, it's one thing for me to deal with low self-esteem and mental illness. That really to some extent is much easier than dealing with self-hatred and self-rejection that's developed over time. So it's important, as you stated, for them to have somebody in the schools that they can turn to without fear of being fired, without fear of being found out. This is an incredible thing. People have little access to me, but they're in school 5 days a week and they have a relationship with this teacher. This is critical to their mental health going forward. And so I hope to see a GSA in the middle school at some point. I don't believe there's one there. There was one in the high school. So thank you again for your support for these students. It is invaluable and it does trickle down to my office in the sense that someone is not suicidal. They take a different turn. I'm more worried about the students who do not make it to my office and who for various reasons are afraid of approaching anyone in their school and keep it a secret that is corrosive over time. GSA, trusted adults in the school, make an incredible difference, much more, I would say, than me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the board at this time? In the back, please.
My name is Stacy Estudillo, 1002 East Main Street. My question is, why are we pushing so much sexuality in school? What about reading, writing, and arithmetic? Kids are not graduating at a disgusting level. We're not allowed to talk about God at school, so why are we pushing sexuality so much? You want us to call them by their pronouns. Children cannot enter into a contract until they're 18. They're under their guardians, their parent. You can't force somebody to do something. We should just get back to basics. Suicide wasn't such a huge thing before everybody started confusing everybody. School is school. This is a public school. We go there to learn, we get life skills, and we go home. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. There will be another opportunity near the end of our meeting. We will now move on to announcements and recognition communications.
So I do have a recognition that is posted in our agenda. Emily, if you come on up, Emily Lessner from Douglas. Douglas was recently awarded a silver medal, and this silver medal comes from the RTI Institute and the DPI, and is to recognize 2 years of work that Douglas has done in reading and reading supports. And they're saying that we're doing a great job at it. And so I want to congratulate you and your staff for that. And I know it's work that we've done throughout the district, and your building has been the champion for some of what we're doing. So I appreciate it. We also get to post that on our webpage. You saw the wall banner that they can hang somewhere in the building, and I think it's always good when we can acknowledge what we are doing within academics and making a difference for students. So congratulations again.
Any other announcements or communications?
Not this time.
All right. We have no items underneath strategic discussion this evening, so we will move on to our reports, and the first up is the superintendent's report.
I love this part. This is where I get to fight with the remote. We'll see how good I am at it today.
Remote usually wins.
The remote always wins.
You're 0 for 3, Jared.
I'm over a lot more than that with this remote, so. We ready? All right, first off, I want to have start with a bunch of celebrations. One, you will see Jenny Berwanger here in the crowd. Jenny, please stand up. She is our new SURES principal, so there's a face to a name, and she started in with us right off the bat, meeting with staff and being able to come to our all staff committee. And is working on hiring candidates still, so I appreciate you jumping in with both feet, and I think we're gonna be ready as we can be, at least for Friday. So congratulations and welcome aboard, Jenny. Also, a couple other celebrations. Here you see two different pictures. The one on the left is a celebration at Maranatha that's happened for the last 22 years annually. You will see again, Maranatha housing a new teacher ceremony. Just happens to be I'm there in the picture. I'm one of many speakers that day that talk about a number of different topics, but the larger part is this is a day where our businesses celebrate our new staff. Not just the public school staff, but also the private school teachers and our new service teachers at the universities and tech colleges in town. And really it's a time for us to celebrate them from the business standpoint, welcoming them like a large welcome wagon to the community. Each year, businesses contribute hundreds of dollars to each individual bag of donated welcome gifts from their businesses. It might be a free soda here or a free that there or whatever it is. But I want to tell you that this community does an outstanding job welcoming staff, new teachers every year. And I just wanted to put that out there to recognize that. The picture on the right is a new staff orientation picture for our new staff here. This was held at the LMC. Every year we go through a new staff welcome. We talk about paperwork. We get a lot of our business stuff done. But this was a family building activity where our new directors, as well as some of our older directors, led them through a rock, paper, scissors game, just to break up the day a little bit, have a little fun, but also get people to talk and meet each other a little bit more as an activity. So it's just a real fun activity. I just wanted to highlight that as part of that day. Also, we had our welcome back ceremony. Here you'll see on the very left, you see some staff members as well as a board member right there on the right, welcoming people into the welcome celebration. Also on the very far right picture, you see a couple other board members there. And in the front, you see 2 out of our 3 speakers. Margaret, I'm sorry I couldn't fit your picture in without making it really look like what are these pictures about. But we had 3 welcoming activity speakers. One was Bonnie Hurdle from our Chamber of Commerce. She's on the left there. On the right was Tony Arnett, board president. Did a wonderful speech about walls and in relation to a poem by Robert Frost. And then Margaret also shared about our connection with United Way and how we can be involved as a larger staff and larger component to United Way and what they do for all of us. So I just wanted to share what a wonderful day it was. We had multiple activities throughout the day. We had many vendors come in. I think it was, how many vendors was it altogether? 8. 8 to 10. Something like that, very close. But they were from banks, businesses, health places. It was kind of a health and wellness fair for our staff. A large part of the day was to talk about health and wellness. Matter of fact, our main speaker there was there talking about how we can learn to do self-calming and self-help habits. Just in many sessions throughout the day. Took a real research-based approach from research that was happening at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, on how we can be healthier in our jobs. And that was not only for us as educators, but it was directly related to some data that they took on educators and some of the techniques that they were doing with educators and how we can practice those techniques to help our educators be better as they're going through the day. And then finally, just some important reminders. We got first day of school for our RMS and WHS students on September 1st. September 6th for our elementary students. That's because of our Ready, Set, Go days, as well as the Labor Day holiday. That's no school on September 5th. And then also our committee meetings throughout September and our monthly board meeting in June. Any questions about this information or anything?
Yeah, it threw me off when you had September. Labor Day's before.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
so I was like looking at my Yeah, I'm pretty sure elementary is sixth, which is Wednesday.
It's 6, right?
Yeah.
But it's because of the 4th. I missed that on the slide there.
Just making sure I didn't get it messed up.
Okay. Any other questions? All I have.
All right, thank you. Next up is fiscal management.
Thank you, Tony. The board met on the 23rd, or the committee met on the 23rd. All committee members were present. We also had present, board president, Mr. Nat, our director of business services, Sarah Duncan, director of innovation, Jason Bowl, supervisor of tech, Dave Lockstein, Jared was there, Bob Logan, and Stacy Riedel. We had a closed session. We started at 5:30, went to about 6:46 to discuss potential sale of property. We had one purchase over $20,000 for the school's PLP. This is the content provider for all eCampus students, WHS digital learners, and WHS credit recovery students, WHS Discovery Academy students, as well as a handful of students who are at middle school. Mr. Logan, we answered some clarifying questions, and we decided to go ahead and determine to be the service. This was, they looked and vetted at it, and this was the superior provider. So that. Purchasing authority, the policy 3310 was reviewed. We had, remember, we had some language that was changed on this in the July meeting. The updated language was approved to move to full board tonight, and it was updated in policy 3312 instead of 3310. So see that. The D&H transportation contract, the updated contract for special ed transportation. It's been presented to the committee with the proposed 4.3% cost increase. It's a question about the contract being extended year over year. It's agreed the contract should move forward to the full board as meeting tonight as well. We discussed the communications specialist position. It was presented as a recommendation from the communications audit. If you remember that the district completed the full-time communications specialist position was presented as being funded in the first year of ESSER 3 by ESSER $3. The committee would like to have a more complete plan for the position. So it was recommended to move this to the full board at its next meeting, but with more information that includes more than the funding plan. And no changes were made to the calendar, and we had our monthly reports. There was a question or two about some of the purchases. But otherwise, nothing new there. And then we adjourned at 7:29 p.m. Next meeting will be September 30th.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments on that report? And again, several of those items are on resolutions for this evening. Hearing none, then we will move on to HR.
Great. HR committee met Monday, August 21st. The committee was all present. We also had Margaret Brady, and we also had Al Yeager there, who was with USI Insurance Services. We reviewed the consent agenda. with staff appointments, resignations, and terminations. There is a resolution tonight, listing all of those things going on. Margaret and her team have been busy trying to, fill all of the positions and things like that, because we know that that has been, that we addressed a little bit more in the staffing update as far as, kind of what's been going on there. We had a health and dental insurance plan performance update. That's why Al Yeager was there. He provided us information regarding our current plan performance with our courts benefits health insurance plan and Delta dental insurance plan. Right now, the plan is performing very favorably. And we currently have, limit increases for the premium rates for the calendar year 2024. But then our cap, will be ending. And so we are looking as far as an increase above the current rate caps as a strong possibility for 2025 premiums. So we had, a set negotiation thing that we had going on and stuff like that. And so 2024 is still, in a very low rate as far as that goes, but then that's going to be ending. So 2025, we'd be looking at some possibilities there. Attendance expectations of staff. We really were able to talk about that. This has come up as a topic for us and things like that about employee attendance expectations. And we talked about evaluated as far as, do we need a specifically defined attendance policy? And so Ms. Brady stated the central office and cabinet administrator teams will be discussing attendance expectations as it impacts the WSD goals for math and literacy. And we wanted to encourage the administration to foster the committee wanted to encourage the administration to foster a strong organizational culture that encourages excellent attendance of employees, because we know how much that affects and sets the example for our students and how important it is to be in school, to be able to learn and for student achievement. Start of the youth school year activities. Margaret gave us a great calendar and invited us to be a part of the August 24th kickoff celebration. We spent some time talking about the staffing update. Ms. Brady informed the committee that we, at that time, had 3 remaining teacher vacancies for the 23-24 school year and extra efforts to secure teachers for those roles that they were spinning hard to be able to make that, to come all that together. She also reported that we are experiencing a shortage of paraprofessional applicants for the current vacancies. And so Margaret was going to work with Dr. Burke and Director of Business Services, Sarah Duncan, to explore possible incentives to attract applicants. We also discussed the concept of building a strategic staffing plan that is guided by the overall WUSD goals. The committee also agreed to further the discussion of the concept of the entire board membership, not just looking at, what is education and the staffing shortages currently, but what is that going to be, projected to be. So we've got some overall planning that needs to happen there. Committee agenda planning. Our anticipated topics for September include consent agenda, employee wellness committee update, possible procedural discussion related to negotiations, and a staffing update. And we discussed an intention to work efficiently and effectively with agreed upon time limits, recognizing that certain topics throughout the year may require more significant time commitment. We adjourned at 7:01 p.m. and our next meeting is Monday, September 18th.
Thank you. Comments or questions on the report?
Was a little disconnected on the attendance expectations and the impact on goals for math and literacy. Can you
Kind of putting
connect
those
those dots to me?
Yeah, we have been noticing as far as some trends as far as certain positions having a little bit more of an absence rate, in which their support in the classroom and things like that make a difference in being able to be there to help students and things like that with their work. So that's kind of how that's.
I'd also add, Dave, that
in as much as Jared and his team focused on student attendance last year, we know that math and literacy are a top priority for the board, where attendance didn't make the radar, but maybe it's not the teachers, it's not the curriculum, it's not even the students, it's getting the butts in the seats. And so we can positively impact math and literature or literacy, excuse me, by getting the butts in the seats. We can do the same thing by making sure the teachers and the staff feel the same way. So indirectly improving the outcomes, not by focusing on the curriculum, but by focusing on the delivery of it and the attitude surrounding it. So much more of a cultural perspective. And Jared, I think, did a good job last year with the students. It's a matter of which portion of the staff might need the same, what do you want to call it, encouragement and reminder that attendance is important. And that was without, of course, modifying the policy, which also came up in policy, is that as we looked at so many things in policy, it was decided that, you know, an increased focus by Jared and his administrative staff, administrative direct report team, is perhaps the better way to first approach things as opposed to revising policy. Might be just an increased focus. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thanks, Tina.
Exactly.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that report? All right, thank you. Ed Services.
Sure, all Ed Services was held on August 8th. All committee members were present along with distinguished guests. This wasn't the first time that we tried to break it down into 3 distinct or different areas of the agenda, but it was director's report, presentation, and discussion. What you'll see in this document are the first 4 or 5 from director's update all the way down to title consolidation monitoring report were all updates that Jenny gave, which is what we've encouraged her to do. They give a high level and sometimes in depth as necessary, things that she's been working on with her team, things that you may find of interest in your review of these. And I encourage you to email her and or I, or ask questions after I give this update, if you have any additional in-depth questions on those 5 or 6 topics. And those we expect will change on a, I don't want to say on a monthly basis, but as needed, depending on where Jenny and her team are focusing their efforts. Next was, it says comments from the chair, which was when I rolled out that workflow. And once again, that workflow is a 15 to 20 minutes from 15 to 30 minutes from Jenny on her giving a director's update, and then getting a presentation or 2 that we have well ahead of time, so that we know what's going to be presented and we have an opportunity to ask questions of the presenter before they arrive. That way it should help that move forward, and then some limited Q&A. And then, of course, the discussion is where we'll leave hopefully the last hour of the meeting to get in depth on any one particular topic that we had pre-agreed was going to be on the agenda. That way we stay focused and we don't double back on something that wasn't on the agenda, surprising either somebody in the room or more specifically surprising people who aren't in the room. So that was laid out in a graphic that's available somewhere, Jenny.
I haven't, I hopefully got uploaded in the minutes. I think I sent it over.
Okay, so it's probably in the minutes for that. Then the 3 topics that we covered, which were carryovers from the July meeting, that was the take-home Chromebook, the Panorama update, and I think the RMS course approval was new. But let me just circle back to the take-home Chromebook. That, of course, was already approved by fiscal. And it really centered on how it was going to be rolled out, but also what we didn't touch on specifically, and that's how it's going to impact the curriculum, mostly in the high school. And that's going to be brought up again at the Future Ready agenda topic for December 23. Then the Panorama update, that is going to result in a resolution and require another update to the Ed Services in spring of 24. And then lastly is the RMS course approval, which Jason wasn't present, but he was able to give an update via email, and those made it into these minutes as to why that course approval, that elective, was added. Jenny did a good job of summarizing that here in the minutes, but if anybody has questions on that specifically, there's going to be a resolution later tonight, and Jason's here to answer that in detail if necessary. So the next meeting is in September, And the one thing that we know is on the agenda was a revisit of the early ELT, Josh. That was switched last year, and we just wanted an update on how that's the goals of that early ELT have been realized, what has gone well, what has gone not according to plan, and then anything else that might be on the recurring calendar that has been discussed and more or less ratified by the committee. And the next meeting is on September 12th. So there's a couple resolutions coming up, mainly the panorama and the sixth grade elective. And if there's any questions on either of those two topics, we can ask then, or we can ask now, Tony. Thank you.
Comments or questions on that report? Thank you. Comment? Anything? No. All right. Actually, it should say policy because the policy is one of that, so, all right. Craig?
On that one, we met, the policy committee met, let's see here. We go. So. Wednesday, August 9th. And, present was myself, Tina Johnson, David Schrader, along with, Jared Burke, Josh Kerr, and AP, Jennifer Pendleton. And we had a discussion on the policies. Specifically, we had a discussion about personal electronic devices and the dress code. We moved those up in the agenda. We'll cover that in just a minute. But we did discuss a little bit at length when it comes to the resolution that you see on the agenda tonight regarding Neola. The intention behind Neola is that it is more or less an efficiency tool. Doesn't necessarily take away any board control over approving policies or anything of that nature. In fact, it's a better tool for us to be able to pull together basically other school districts' policies as well, and kind of tailor a policy that would suit Watertown best. And along with legal review from Neola, it just does make a lot more sense when it comes for us to be able to be efficient in our process. That does mean that some processes might need to change in the future. But we would be recommending, this committee would be recommending that for approval tonight. The attorney's fees for processing current policy through the current process with policy actually seems to be pretty similar in the cost that it would be to cover Neola. So we still may incur some other legal expenses from time to time regarding policy, but Neola would backstop our attorneys when it comes to a legal matter that goes to court. So that you can expect that discussion later. Then we had a discussion regarding retention of students through the 8th grade. I was the one sponsoring this particular policy, and the discussion mainly focused on the pre-retention part of the retention policy. It's important that if we have a child that is in a situation of being retained potentially, that we're doing everything we possibly can to have interventions and measures to prevent that from happening. So we will be looking for further language and flexibility for children to, we'll be going through some of that language for the next meeting in October. Then we had a discussion about personal electronic devices. This particular policy was sponsored by Lori Holland. And at the time, there was, the district is actually concurrently rolling out a one-to-one Chromebook program. And the committee had decided that we might table some of this discussion for the October meeting as well, as we get familiarized with how that's going to look, as well as you know, how cell phones are being utilized in the classroom, with Chromebooks being a one-to-one type of aid this time around. So we did talk with Mr. Kerr and Ms. Pendleton regarding any thoughts they may have had to aid in clarification on this matter. The same thing with dress code policy 3220. This particular policy was sponsored by Tina Johnson. And we also had the opportunity to have a discussion with Principal Kerr and A.B. Pendleton about what types of expectations might be for the dress code, and to see if there's clarification needed to make sure that the board is also on the same page with the administration in that matter. So that will also come back to the committee in October for further discussion. Then there was a records retention policy that happens to have some language that we need to get in there at some point, but we are going to table that until we have a clear direction where we're going with Neola and the event that may help us form that particular policy. Extracurricular activities, this particular policy was sponsored by Tina Johnson. Tina Johnson happened to share the differences and definitions between extracurricular, co-curricular, and the clubs that were being added to the policy. And this will be up for the first read in the August board meeting. However, there will be further work to be had on this. I don't see that in our first reading right now, but that's, I mean, it's, so the next steps will be work related to the funding of those activities to determine equitable fairness. The next meeting is Wednesday, October 11th at 5:30. And
Sorry. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on that report? Go ahead, Tina.
Just a question. And I'm sorry that I didn't ask this prior. I know I was just kind of looking back through, and I know our extracurriculars, so is it, so I think we kind of, did we miss it for the first read for today? Or is it in there? Okay, so then what do we do with that? Does it get added to next month's for first read, or how do we?
We can't bring it forward for next month. I think there's an important fiscal discussion that also needs to occur about that particular topic.
Right, yeah, we were
It
just
could
looking at.
very much influence it, but it could very much influence the language, the definitions you use, depending on, frankly, what kind of money is available. And we don't want to set ourselves up in a situation where we're creating definitions that we can't fiscally support.
Yeah, I think part of the larger conversation is when it goes to first reading, we as a committee, as a policy committee, recognize that there needs to be a second part of the work. We started with that, which is our first part was definition. But in order to talk more about, you know, kind of equitably how we support funding for different types of groups and everything, it was better to start with definition and trying to have a definition of them. And then have some discussion around how do we equitably look at funding and doing those kinds of things for the different groups that we're working on. That part of the conversation is a fiscal issue. I also shared, because there was some conversation at the committee meeting, that some of the policy committee members felt that that was a continued policy issue, not a fiscal issue. And I alerted our board president that there may be some discussion between chairs around where that work goes. When that work happens, then we'll know better, like, are we done with this first read, or do we want to
So we don't have to first read and then first read and then first read. I could try to maybe get that.
But the policy that Tina's referring to was strictly the one that you and her worked on regarding definition.
Correct.
Which was just co-curricular, extracurricular and club. I wouldn't say there was no financial nor obligations. It was mostly to define which categories each one was in as they relate to each other, namely because I still don't. I'd have to go back to the policy to tell you which one chess was in and which one, FFA was in and which one basketball was in, because. A lot of these things I've never heard of before, but to your point, Tony and Tina, if it goes to first read next month, I don't think it slows anything down, especially. Given that policy and fiscal still have to talk, as Tony just alluded to. That if there's gonna be any money tied to it, that's gonna be a bigger conversation than just the definitions.
And the reality is, there is money tied to it.
Even in the definitions.
There is money tied to it. Everybody has an
But-
expectation that money is following those definitions. And so even you can say that, well, the policy doesn't
Okay.
specify that, but that's the way it's operationalized.
Got it.
And we know the next question is gonna come up is, well, now that my group qualifies. How much am I getting?
Got it.
Do they qualify? And if they do, how much money, and is that for what? For transportation, for supplies, for a coach? All those levels of definitions that we're trying to start operationalizing a little bit through the business office.
So there needs to be discussion of. And what do we have available to support that? Because if we're about to broaden the definition significantly beyond where it is today. And there's no additional money, then you're really having a conversation about who you're taking money away from. In which case, that begins, so you
So
can't,
I did not-
I don't think you can talk about the definitions without talking about. People's expectations about where the money flows as a result.
But back to the agenda point, because we're getting a little off the
Yep.
agenda. The reason that it's not listed here is I didn't give. Lynn clear information as to list it because I was unsure where the work needed to go. So I own that, that the reason it wasn't listed.
So then where do we,
I'd like to suggest that. Our policy and fiscal
Sure.
affairs can work together to determine which committee. Obviously, we don't want to go through two committees. In terms of doing it, it's not a matter of discussing each point. So between the two of you, you can figure out which committee that should be, that part of the discussion should go through, then. We can move forward and possibly still get that discussion to occur in September and bring us back into the first reading at the end of September.
Is it board level work or is it administrative work that could happen? And with a recommendation to the board or committee?
So I think there's administrative input in terms of the existing funding levels. And there's board level input in terms of where to allocate resources.
I think we could take this offline and then we'll bring it back. I'd like to see is this a new policy?
This is a modification of it.
The current co-curricular program policy or extracurricular program?
Yeah, it's the extracurricular activities is actually intended to be a clarification. So hopefully there is a good clarification.
This is, yeah, I'm looking at the extracurricular policy, right, there is no definition there, so. Clarification, I'd like to see that, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just and appropriate that we come up with the right definitions, but people have expectations about what those definitions mean.
It's a astute pitfall that I didn't see.
And
Right,
we
well-
don't want to sit in a situation where it says, well, now that I qualify. Where do I submit my budget?
and that was my understanding when I brought it forth as a sponsor, that is, one of the things that I knew that there was, work needing to be done in that. So I just want to make sure that, we're bringing it to first read. And so just that it has a place somewhere, so, we can further that work.
Cognizant of the fact that there is not a policy committee in September, I'll talk with Craig and that we, this is something that it does touch fiscal, which I believe it does. And we can bring it up in fiscal, Craig's on the fiscal committee as well. So we can have that add to that agenda, so we can bring that up. Again, I want to look at the revised policy before we make a final decision.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.
And just one point of clarification, I don't think there was ever a question of. Financial impact on this particular policy, it was just a matter of workflow that was questioning, that was a question here. And if it just so happens that there's a concurrent, first read that makes the most sense, I guess that makes the most sense.
All right, thank you. Other comments or questions on the report? Okay, planning, did you want to say anything about planning?
I'll have plenty next time.
But
Okay.
again, Tony, is this one where we wanted to keep all four subcommittees on the
Yeah, we
schedule all the time?
Yeah, then if you just have all of them listed.
We can have it, EV planning slash.
We're just going with all five.
All, just list all five.
If nothing else, you can just.
Right.
Diana doesn't have updates. she doesn't have updates.
When's the next meeting?
The next meeting is September 13th.
Whatever Jared said on his slide.
Yeah. See,
All
there
right.
you go. That's your update.
There it is.
Okay,
Put me on the spot. Thanks a lot.
all right, this brings us to the consent agenda, resolution 9242. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Second. Moved by Fred, seconded by Craig. The consent agenda includes our board meeting minutes, our committee summaries. Under personnel and staffing, you have retirements, resignations, and hirings. You have the approval of bills, and you have the first and second reading of policies. There are a handful of each, both first reading and second reading. Comments or questions on the motion?
I would like to make a motion to amend it and pull out the first reading of the policy 6332 for dispensing of creatine.
There was no changes in the policy.
I think it is due for some changes. Talks about terms like nutrition.
So just, sorry, before we get, so as a point of order, is there a second on that motion?
Second.
All right, now, conversation on the motion.
To stick with, well, Craig, you might have just said it, but what we've generally agreed to, Dave, is that minor changes like changing district to WUSD, et cetera, are a necessary update to policies. It stops nothing from policy from reviewing it at a later date. So these weren't materially changed. These were changed as a course of an administrative action, in which case I think it's acceptable to leave them in for today's first read, but it's very appropriate for you to ask or suggest that the committee, policy subcommittee review that for a more in-depth review, just to keep the flow. Otherwise, some of these things just get left behind and words don't ever get updated because they don't make the agenda. Not denying that a major change isn't warranted, just commenting that it's sometimes simpler just to go with the flow in this and then add it to the workload of the policy committee. But appreciate your
I
comments.
would agree, we would not lose anything by changing district to USD.
Any
But I
other
think it should be here.
comments or questions on the motion to amend? A roll call vote on the motion to amend.
Tony Arnett,
No.
Tina Johnson. No. David Schrader,
No,
David Smith,
No,
Craig Wortman.
no,
Mike Higgins,
no.
Lori Howard. No. Fred Yant,
No.
Diane Johnson. No.
All right, the motion to amend fails. And again, I think it's entirely appropriate to begin with our bifurcated workflow and policy now. Now you know where to take the major, suggested major revisions. What process to go with. Okay.
now you're responsible. Right, now your next question, Dave, is when's Neola here?
All right, any other comments or questions on the consent agenda resolution? Hearing none, roll call vote please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson. Yes. David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith.
Yes.
Craig Wortman.
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Howard. Yes. Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson. Yes.
And the motion carries. All right, next up are our action items. First resolution is 9243, which is the Neola licensing agreement. Do I hear a motion on 9243?
So moved.
Second.
That was moved by David Schrader, seconded by Tina. Did we get that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's right. All right, comments or questions on the motion? Appreciate the work the policy committee has done on this. Look forward to this shift. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next is resolution 9244, communications specialist. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Craig, seconded by Fred. Again, this was mentioned in the fiscal report, and you have the more fully developed position description attached. Comments or questions on the motion? Again, this creates the position, but does not at this point name someone for that role. Yes, Tina, please.
I mean, first, I'm familiar with, the proposal that came through and things like that, and just as a point to put out there that it's not to replace the line of communications that should already be occurring, amongst ESC, buildings, parents, all that kind of stuff. I just have a question as far as, I think I understand, as far as it was saying that it was using the AL funding from the ESSER dollars. And then a point of clarification as far as the general operating budget, would we need to find additional funds for it? And so if we're saying yes to this, are we saying no to something else, or we're saying yes to this, are we saying no to AL, or?
So what this is designating is that for the first year for this position, I assume it's this year, if we're finding somebody right away.
Right.
It's being funded through this mechanism.
Yeah.
But when you look ahead to next year, i.e. the 24-25 school year, then the funds will need to come from the operating budget. So nothing additional required for this year beyond what is stated here.
Okay.
Is that, did I get
Sort
your
of,
answer?
yeah,
Did I get your
so I
question
think I
correct?
understand, that part of it, but I just didn't know as far as like the general operating budget, is there space in there for that, or?
We talked about this in the fiscal, and one of the things we said is that we sent this to Jared and said, look, we want this in the position in this. We need to have you come up with a budget, figure out the budget, and how this fits in with this as we move forward. It's not we want this in and take this out to replace it. It's, here's this, decided this was an addition that needed to be had. They agreed, they liked the idea with this, so now is how do we figure this out with the budget? And that's where Jared and Sarah are gonna sit down and have those conversations and then come back to the board.
Yeah, just another point of clarification. This position in the AL position, advanced learning position. We were able to carve out funding this year through our ESSER funding. And it does create an issue for next year's budget. We know what we're gonna be getting from the state. We also know some particulars about this year's budget, but even this year's budget isn't 100% finalized. Once it is, we will know where this year's budget is, but going forward, every year, we have to build a new budget. And if this is, this position and the other position are effectively adds to a budget that we had as existing. In order to stay budget neutral, if those adds are more than what the state is giving us for possible increase in funding, we're going to have to make a cut somewhere else in the budget to make sure we continue to fund this position. So we will know that better next year as we're moving forward from the decisions we make this year, which will possibly affect also salary increases, other things that go into next year's budget. And when we build next year's budget, we will have these two positions cognizant in the front of our mind. How do we fund for these if this causes our budget to go over what was allotted from the DPI and other mechanisms to bring funding in? Okay, so you saying yes means, yeah, we've got to be really cognizant of that. And in order to make our budget work, we don't know where, those funding mechanisms are gonna have to come from. If the revenue isn't there or enough. Okay, so we will have to be cognizant of that and maybe cutting some else. If we want to keep these positions going.
Other comments or questions on the resolution? Roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson, yes. David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Morgan,
Yes.
Mike Higgins.
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
And the motion carries. Next up is resolution 9245, our contract with D&H Enterprises for busing. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second. Moved by David Schrader, seconded by Dave Smith. Comments or questions on the motion? Again, it was described in fiscal, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Were we able to resolve the sports busing issue that we had last spring? Pardon me if this has already been addressed. I know there was shortages, like kids were leaving at noon for games that were later and needed to be housed at other. And no, as part of the busing contract, if that's all fit together, or if this is a different
So.
thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, it's not part of this contract, but in short, because it's transportation, and I know that it ties a little bit to the agenda item. We are working very hard to, finalize those solutions with the other vendor that we use, who does that. I did also have a discussion with Mr. Holtzman today, see if he could, through his staffing, do that. Want to recognize that there's a nationwide shortage in bus drivers, so if there's anybody out there who wants to learn how to drive a bus. We're gonna try to work at that. I know our companies are working hard to make sure they pay well. But we had it covered within the company that we're using. There have been some recent impacts to that, and that's in flux right now. Our backup is to go to other companies, to see, and that's again why I talked to Mark today, to see if he had any ability to help support that. I will be talking to other companies to see if they have other abilities to help support that. And we will continue to try to do whatever we can to make sure that we have the busing coverage in a timeline that's supportive to education purposes as well. I'm not gonna tell you that, yes, we have it 100% solved. But I'm hopeful that we're getting it there. We're starting to see a little bit more people being able to get hired and some of that, but not 100% on the wheels yet.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions on the motion?
Well, the other one that was made at committee level as well, but this is a 5-year contract, I think it is. And we keep reopening it. I think we need to look at how we can write the contract so that it legitimately rolls forward and we keep reopening it and give them 5 years, reopening it 5 years every year. So it needs to go on administrative agenda to get in line with the other contract.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, roll call please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson, yes. David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland. Yes. Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next is 9246. The contract for the 2023-2024 truancy abatement officer. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Moved by Fred, seconded by Diana. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none. Roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson, yes. David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland.
Yes.
Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next, we have 9247, which is the contract for the 2023-2024 school resource officers. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Tina and seconded by Mike. comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland.
Yes.
Fred Yant,
Yes.
and Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next is resolution 9248. This is the renewal of the school's PLP licensing that was described previously during our committee reports. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Moved by David Schrader. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mike. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson.
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next is resolution 9249. Purchase of the Panorama software. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Tina, seconded by Diana. Again, covered in our committee reports, but are there any comments or questions? Please.
So. Just help me understand and connect the dots. I mean, we happen to have a survey for, what's it, social emotional learning. At a cost of 18,000 from ESSER $3, but the Panorama quote also lays out 5 years there. So are we agreeing to a 5-year commitment by approving this particular agenda item, or is this?
Good question. No, it's a 1-year commitment at this point. The team that examined it, did not want to move forward with the longer quote because they wanted to, see if that was something that was going to be a fit for us.
Okay. My next question is, so if we're utilizing $18,000 of taxpayer funded money for a survey, how does this particular survey best serve mental health needs?
So this is specifically about social learning, it's
Social.
not about mental health. It's the team of social emotional learning coaches through the district, along with our student services team, wanted us to have a way to track how the social emotional learning lessons have been showing growth in our students. And so that's really what this is intended for. It is not intended as any sort of mental health screener or anything with mental health. Good question.
So in a 1-year commitment, are we able to take that data and track it over? I mean, it seems like we have a 1-year plot of data, and the assumption would be that in subsequent years, we would actually be able to utilize that data to track things, as you had mentioned. I'm confused on how you're going to be able to track data with 1 year's worth of surveys.
Yeah, good question. The intent is that we would give it 3 times in this 1 year. We might be a little behind on our first administration. So we can see growth within this year and determine if it's something that we want to be able to have to track over multiple years. So because we're administering it more than once this school year, we'd be able to track the data within the school year. But you make a very good point of if you want longitudinal tracking, then as a team, we'd have to discuss if this is something that we would like to continue with.
So my understanding is that you're looking for a tool.
Correct.
And you're trying to say, for 1 year, we're going to test drive this tool and see if this tool gives us the kind of data that we need in order to be able to assess ourselves appropriately. And so it's not a 1-year trial to see whether we're getting results in the program from our SEL program. It's a 1-year trial of this measurement tool to see if this tool will give us the data we need to measure our program. That's what I understood to be the case.
And the other piece to add to that, if I can add in, that was brought up is that it has additional resources to support things, which the other programs did not. So helping teachers to work smarter, not harder, is just an added benefit for them. So if this makes sense and can give them more than what they currently have, it'll be a great tool. And then some.
Please, Craig.
I guess my concern is along the lines of social emotional learning. I'm hoping that, I was a little bit hoping for, when we utilize dollars in ESSER 3, that we'd be able to have some immediate, needs met. And when it comes to social emotional learning, and when it comes to a survey, I guess I fail to see how that is able to meet those immediate needs. At least I'm kind of confused by that, at the moment, so I'm not sure. I'm sure, I feel that there's other ways to spend this money effectively, for social emotional learning. I don't know that I can support this particular, ask.
Can I respond?
Yes.
So as Diana alluded to in her comments, not only is there a survey, there are interventions that are linked in that as well. So if a classroom teacher gives a survey, notices, hey, my whole class is low on organization, for example, there would be lessons within the portal to address those. You know, if they notice across third grade, there are, 7 students who need, support on like self-management skills, and potentially the counselor might be able to pull those 7 students and then pull information from this portal on a lesson to help support them in those areas too. So I should say that it has more than just this survey in there. There's also the intervention tracking, as well as different interventions within that to be used immediately in the classroom. So that's a good point. Thank you, Craig.
The committee corrected, acknowledge that, and we could see that very clearly in the elementary level. We were legitimately challenged on see how it's going to work in the upper levels. So that's kind of part of what's going on here, is the challenge for the administration to come back and say, how are these interventions, how are you going to use this data across all students, not isolate just particular ones and use it on the interventions that are needed. Anything else, Dan?
I mean, it just seems like I don't have a lot of information. I don't know what kind of questions are being asked. I don't know how that, I respect what you're saying. I guess I'm still unclear how those types of objectives can't be met through other means. I think that other surveys can probably fulfill some of those types of things. And I don't know, it just seems like a lot to spend on something for 1 year.
Tina?
I don't know the details of the questions and things like that. I'm assuming you guys have vetted that out, and this looks like the best option there. I'm excited to see something like this. I'm not on the committee, so I don't know the specifics. I know you guys have, I'm sure have been very diligent about your work in the committee and everything like that. I was excited to see something like this when I went to the school board state conference last January. I sat in on one of the sessions that talked about tools like this and how helpful they were. I don't remember what exact tool it was, but how helpful that tool was, not only to the students, but to the staff. And then, can kind of maybe help you collect some data depending upon, whatever it was. So I'm excited for us to be able to, move forward in seeing something that will support the students and things like that.
All right. Other comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
No.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland.
No.
Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Our last resolution for the evening is 9250. And this is the approval of an elective course for RMS at the 6th grade. Do I hear a motion?
So, second.
Moved by David Schrader. Seconded by Dan. And again, covered at services and discussed there, but comments or questions on the motion?
Just procedural question, why is this coming to the board?
So new course approvals always come to the board for.
So this is a brand new course.
Yes.
That's what he says.
Yep.
All right.
And if I could ask, Jason, can you just paraphrase that email in, let's say, a minute regarding how the minutes changed on some classes and freed up some opportunities for additional electives? Because there's gonna be other classes like that are gonna be coming in front of us at some point, I assume. I'm not saying this year, I'm just saying is that there was some changes done at Riverside that Jason can probably summarize just for everybody's background that caused the opportunity for this to, or allowed the opportunity for.
I want you to cut me off at 1 minute, no matter what.
Yeah,
I'm doing.
you got it, I will.
Words
Yeah,
are last.
we got it.
So-
10 seconds in.
So with the adoption of Wit and Wisdom, our ELA curriculum, we needed to maximize the amount of minutes in our core, so we moved from a 6-period day to a 5-period day. Math is a full block, ELA is a full block, so 2/5 of your day is math and ELA. And so some other things kind of had to give a little bit. And last year we accomplished that by having skinnies, 40-minute classes or 80-minute classes. And we decided, given the awesome results of our the ELA curriculum, we moved ELA out of the STEM environment and out of dual language and into the environment that the trained Fidelity teachers in Wit and Wisdom were teaching that ELA content. So in order to do that, we had to reorganize some things around the STEM Academy and reorganize some things around the schedule as a whole. And so one of the ways the STEM teachers, with a project Lead the Way course, which was not offered at 6th grade prior to this year, there was an opportunity to make use of their training and background, the resources within the STEM Academy, and interests that we had in the building for sure from our students to get into that pathway just a little bit earlier. That's the 1-minute view from above.
Okay. Comments or questions on the motion?
Is this purely for the STEM Academy?
All 6th grade.
Thank you, Jason.
Short quote for all 5th graders.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the motion?
Do we need, I mean, is this good, like referring back to the ed services? Do we need a description or something like that in there or something attached?
As presented,
Could
yeah,
you-
I think
okay.
sufficient with
So
the
that's
action.
sufficient?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All right, anything else? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This brings us to the second part of our agenda for public input, if there are members of the audience who would like to address the board at this time. Anyone? Anyone online? All right, then we will move to a closed session. Do I hear a motion to go into closed session for the reasons stated in the agenda?
Motion. Second.
Moved by Fred, seconded by Diana. Comments or questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Tony Arnett,
Yes?
Tina Johnson.
Yes.
David Schrader.
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Craig Wortman, Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland.
Yes.
Fred Yant,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. We are in closed session.
Margaret,